Welcome to another Thursday night Bible study, brought to you as a ministry of SIGBC.
So, today we're talking about Psalm chapter 98. And as I mentioned last week, Psalm chapter 98 is kind of a companion chapter to Psalm chapter 96, which we studied last week. Psalm 98 has no description other than a psalm. And it just begins with, again, like 96, it begins with the words, "Sing to the Lord a new song." There are a number of passages in the Bible that talk about singing a new song to the Lord. And so we're going to dwell on that just a little bit as we contemplate Sing Together for Joy before the Lord. Psalm chapter 98, verses 1 through 9, which is the entire chapter. I think one of the things that for humans throughout the centuries has been true is when we are happy, we sing. Or for some people, singing makes them happy. I'm not sure about how you feel about music, but for some people, they can't stand silence, and they have to have music on all the time. In other words, they have to be entertained all the time. And if there's no music, then there's no fun. And so for people like that, their joy is created by the music that they listen to. But that's not the idea here. The idea here, I think, is to express the joy that we have in song and express the gratitude that we have and express the awe that we have for God in song from a genuine heart. And so let's read the chapter with that in mind, that this is a joy that wells up, a gratitude that wells up in song, as we read the chapter very quickly and then contemplate a few things from this chapter. Sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm have worked salvation for him. The Lord has made his salvation known and revealed his righteousness to the nations. He has remembered his love and his faithfulness to Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Burst into jubilant song with music. Make music to the Lord with the harp and the sound of singing, with trumpets and the blast of the ram's horn. Shout for joy before the Lord, the King. Let the sea resound and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Let the rivers clap their hands, let the mountains sing together for joy. Let them sing before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples with equity. I don't know how you feel about poetry. Poetry is usually the basis for most hymns that are sung in churches. And I think poetry is attempted in a lot of more contemporary songs. But it used to be, when the hymns were written back in the 16, 17, 18, even 1900s, someone would write a beautiful poem about God or their relationship with God or what God means to them or their gratitude for God. And they would write this poem, and then a musician would then take that poem and put it to music. And so you would have one writer that was the writer of the words and another writer that was the writer of the music that those words would go. And sometimes the music didn't quite match. And so once in a while, you'll find songs that people have rewritten the music for. And when you sing it in the new tune, it becomes so much more meaningful. I did that several years ago. I wrote a song, and it was a very personal and meaningful song to me, but I didn't like the music that I had put the song to. And so one of our church members, who also felt the meaningfulness of the personal and meaningfulness of the song, uh, said, "Can I put this to music?" And they put it to a completely different tune, slightly more contemporary sound, and it really made the song much more meaningful. That was Kent Panya, by the way, that uh, made the song, wrote the music to the song, and made it so much more meaningful. So it used to be that poetry was the basis for songs that were written, and the Psalms are just that. The Psalms are beautiful poetry that were set to music that we don't know what kind of music they were set to actually. There are designations in a lot of the Psalms. There are musical notations and musical designations of the type of music that it is, and even the tune that it's supposed to be sung to, that we don't know at all what those tunes are supposed to be. But a lot of people have taken the Psalms and put them to another kind of music, and they are invariably meaningful and touching because they are God's inspired poetry written to be sung by the Jews in worship of God. And so this psalm is no exception. Let the sea resound and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the mountains sing together for joy. Let them sing before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. And obviously, that's a metaphor for everyone on earth and everything in earth praising God. Poetry. 4 things we can observe from this passage. The first is that we are to sing together for joy out of gratitude to God, a new song for all he has done for us in both provision and salvation. So we recognize it's a little bit long of an idea, but the point tries to encapsulate the message that the song is introduced with. The idea is that we do sing together for joy. And the reason we sing together for joy is out of a heart of gratitude to God. And that gratitude is expressed not in rote tradition and expectation, but it's to be sung in a new or fresh way. So we sing together for joy out of gratitude to God, a new song for all that he has done for us in both provision, that is giving us what we need in life, and salvation, that is delivering us both our eternal destiny and delivering us for the consequences of sin, as well as delivering us in times of distress and trouble here upon the earth. So he says in verse 1, sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. We're grateful for all the marvelous things that he has done. His right hand and his holy arm have worked salvation for him. Now, the Hebrew word for the word new song here is actually kodash, and it can be translated something new, but it also can be translated something fresh. And so perhaps the writer means, more importantly than singing newly written songs, that we sing every song of worship with a freshness and recognizing the depth of its meaning. And so regardless of the style of music that the song has been written in, the idea is a heart of worship sings that song in a fresh way every single time. Now, we've mentioned before that there are statistics that are given that people have come up with. How they came up with these, I don't know. But the idea is that once you've sung the same song 50 times, then you no longer contemplate the meaning. You no longer think about what it means or the message. It's just now rote. Maybe it's a nostalgic feeling that you get from singing that song. But we're not expected to sing songs either from tradition or from nostalgia. We are supposed to sing for meaning. so the idea is that we sing because God has done marvelous things and God has saved us, and so we sing out of a heart of gratitude for all that he has done for us. Second observation we can make here is that we are to sing together for joy because we remember that the God who saves us remembers his love for us and his faithfulness to us. The God who provides this salvation remembers us in love. And he remembers his promise to us that he will be faithful. Remember, Jesus even said before he was to leave the earth, after giving the Great Commission, he said, "And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age," or even to the end of this generation. All generations, that is. Verses 2 and 3, the Lord has made his salvation known and revealed his righteousness to the nations. He has remembered his love and his faithfulness to Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. Now, that is, of course, a poetic reference to the history of Israel. And the psalmist is saying, you know what? God delivered us from Egypt. All the nations were witness to that. The rumor got around. God brought us into the promised land. All the nations of the earth were witness to that. Rumor got around. God parted the seas twice. Rumor got around. And so you have the reputation of the faithfulness of God to Israel that all the ends of the earth have seen. And the only way that the nations can see the salvation of God in our lives is if we testify of the fact that of what God has done for us. And so since the Lord has made his salvation known and revealed his righteousness to the nations, through us, it behooves us to testify of the gospel of the grace of God and the joy that results in acting on that message. Number 3, we are to sing together for joy by lifting our voices in jubilant song accompanied by joyfully played instruments. Now, throughout history, there have been people in churches that have approved of or disapproved of various instruments being played in the church. And it's a cultural thing, obviously, but the people who have traditions don't understand that it's only a part of their culture. they because it's the part of their tradition, they begin to believe that that is how worship is supposed to be done. And so for a while, the organ was the instrument of worship. And when a piano was introduced in worship, people opposed it because a piano is something that people played in saloons or bars. And so it was a worldly instrument. And it took a while for people to accept that the piano was something you could play in a church. And of course, that has been repeated, and not necessarily wrongly so, because if an instrument is associated with an immoral location or act, then perhaps that instrument should be carefully considered before being used in worship. Because if the world recognizes that instrument as an instrument used in worldly music, then maybe the church should be careful. However, aside from the association factor, God says use instruments to accompany your joyfully sung songs. Next week, we're going to be looking at Psalm chapter 100, which is one of my 3 favorite psalms. Psalm chapter 1, Psalm chapter 23, and Psalm chapter 100 are my 3 favorite psalms in the scriptures. And so I'm looking forward to sharing Psalm chapter 100. But in Psalm chapter 100, this same phrase, just like 96 repeated the phrase, sing for joy to the Lord, a new song, Psalm chapter 100 repeats the phrase, shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. And so in verses 4 through 6, the observation is made that we are to sing together for joy by lifting our voices in jubilant song accompanied by joyfully played instrument. In other words, even the musicians are supposed to use their instruments in worship of God. I had a friend, I won't mention any names, but I had a friend who was a missionary here in Japan, and he had a friend who played the guitar, but the friend was unsaved. And so my missionary friend suggested to the unsaved Japanese friend that perhaps he could play the guitar in the worship service. And the unsaved friend, mind you, said to him, I would be happy to play, but I think it might be hypocritical for me to be playing hymns of worship to God when I'm not a believer. And I can't play and sing from the heart because I'm not a follower of Christ, and that would be hypocritical, don't you think? So an unsaved person rightly um, shared how they felt about how an instrument should reflect worship to God from the heart. And so the psalmist says, look, both our voices and the instruments that accompany those voices are to be jubilant and with joy used to worship our Creator. And he says in verses 4 through 6, shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Burst into jubilant song with music. Make music to the Lord with the harp and the sound of singing, with trumpets and blast of the ram's horn. Shout for joy before the Lord, the King. Now, we don't have a tradition of playing the ram's horn in worship. But in Israel, the ram's horn was one of the most commonly used instruments in worship. And even today, actually, I have seen people who have played the ram's horn in their Jewish traditional, not Christians, but in their Jewish traditional ritualistic worship of God. They have used the ram horn in their music. And so for us, it would sound strange. In fact, for us today, even the trumpet is a little bit of a loud instrument to be used for worship. And the trumpet of David's day, for example, was not one where you had the fingering. It was one where you had to use your lips to play only maybe 5 different notes that you could play on one trumpet, and like a bugle, for example. And so they would be limited in the notes that they could play on a trumpet or a ram's horn, even. But the point wasn't what kind of instrument you use. The point was that you play them with joy in your heart as you sing to God, with a heart of gratitude to Him and a heart of joy before the Lord, the King. So he observes, we are to shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth, and burst into jubilant song with music, and make this music to the Lord. You accompanied by instruments, whatever the instruments are that in your culture you happen to be playing, but play it from the heart. When I was, wherever I would go in India, as we traveled around the different churches in India, the only instrument that most churches that we visited in the poorest areas of Andhra Pradesh were a small set of 2 what we might call bongo drums, but it was just a small set of 2 drums that often teenagers would set the timing for the music that was being sung using these instruments. And the people would clap their hands and they would sing to the rhythm of the only instrument that was there, the drums, and sing. But the worship was joyful and the worship was heartfelt. And I had a few of these songs translated from in the area we were in. It was Telugu, not Hindi, but I had some of the songs, the Telugu songs, translated from Telugu into English so that I could understand what the meaning of the songs were. And very, very meaningful words set to music, and the only instrument being played Not a piano, not a guitar, just the drum, not a trumpet, not a harmonica, just the drums. But that was the instrument that was used worshipfully to sing to God. And so the third observation is we are to sing together for joy by lifting our voices in jubilant song, accompanied by joyfully played instrument. Number 4, we are to sing together for joy as we recognize that God will always judge the world in righteousness and its people with equity. In other words, as we observed last week as well, God is fair and God is patient. And while God demands rightness of his children, and while God wants us to do what is right every time, simply because it is right, while God demands this righteousness of us, he is also a God of compassion, who understands our weaknesses. He understands that we are simply frail human beings. And so his judgment in righteousness is always with equity. And this is where the most poetic aspect of this chapter comes in, where, as we read a minute ago, let the sea resound and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the mountains sing together for joy. And I'm assuming this is probably a not just a metaphor. It is a metaphor, but it's probably not just a metaphor. It's probably also um, reflecting the echo that comes from the rivers and from the mountains that give the song a more vibrant uh, feel to it. And so poetically, he expresses it by saying, let the rivers clap their hands and the mountains sing together for joy. Let them sing before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. He would judge the world in righteousness and the peoples with equity. Now, these two words, righteousness and equity, become very important considerations. And so with this, we close. Righteousness in the Hebrew is the word tzedek, that which is normal, just, or right. In other words, that which is naturally, morally, or legally the appropriate thing to do. And so God's definition of righteousness is, are we living by his standard, the standard that he has set? Because we are called simply to obey, right? And if we translate that back to the relationship of children with their parents, then the standard for whether or not a child is doing right becomes whether or not the child is doing what the parents ask them to do, because the standard is, by God's definition, children obey your parents. And so, but since by God's definition the standard is children obey your parents, then the question becomes, how are the children responding to their parents? And what if the parents say, I want you to wash the dishes? The child's not supposed to be, no, I don't want to. That's disobedient to parents. And the standard isn't, what do you want to do? The standard is, what do your parents ask you to do? And so God's standard of righteousness is that which is naturally, morally, or legally considered the right thing to do. Equity in the Hebrew is the word meshar, and it has to do with evenness or straightness or uprightness or smoothness. In other words, the fact that God judges with equity means that his path is always going to be straight. And whether we agree with his decisions or not doesn't mean anything. We just have to trust that whatever God determines is the best course of action, that is in fact equity. That is in fact fair. Why? Because he's our creator. And he calls upon us to trust him. And so anything that God does in judgment is fair because he is the standard for fairness. And so understanding these things, We sing songs of worship to God out of gratitude to God for who he is and what he has done. In other words, singing is a natural expression of the grateful joy we feel in our hearts in thanks to God. So, again, sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. And sometimes life is rough. Sometimes life is difficult. Sometimes life is cruel. And sometimes we feel abandoned. But the reality is, God is always with us. And he is a God who judges righteously and with equity.
Thank you for listening. You can also join us in person or live on Facebook every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Japan time. This has been a ministry of Sakahogi International Grace Baptist Church.